Alright, Shalom Tic Tac. So in this video, I want to advise of something that just recently occurred with me, right? So ever since I was given a final order for to be remanded, institutionalized, in other words, by the North Tonawanda City Court, because failure to identify, even though I did identify supposedly, is still a crime, make that make sense. But likewise, because I was asserting my First Amendment immunity, separation of church and state, where it states quite clearly under the First Amendment that Congress can't prohibit the free exercise directly or indirectly. So if a law is passed that indirectly violates the rights of the people, it is automatically null and void nevertheless. And hence, the judicial nor the executive branch can enforce that law, right? So that said, and you can go to my YouTube and what have you, and my website as well, and see the clarification of all the rights that were violated in that simple traffic infraction violation, right? But since there is no victim, hence there is no crime, I was asserting the principle that they had no authority. They didn't have jurisdiction, right? So without due process of law, they arrested me falsely, which is kidnapping under Title 18, Section 241 as well as 242, which could get them life imprisonment or the death penalty, depriving them of their rights, right? Because they are public servants. That's violation of Penal Code 195.00, official misconduct grounds for impeachment, to which even the governor can't pardon, because the governor, it likewise applies to the governor. The governor can be removed in any state for official misconduct. So despite how Democrats are permeating the notion that, well, there is no precedence for removing a governor in the state of New York. Yeah, there it is. That's the code. Code 195, Penal Code 195.00. They cited me with Penal Code 195.05, obstruction, right? But that would mean that they're in their lawful capacity performing actions in their lawful capacity, but they were not. They're depriving me of rights under the color of law, which is that whole Title 18, Section 242. Conspiracy against rights, since there's 4 of them ultimately. And they wanted to try to escalate that, and even though they wanted to, I think they tried to cite it as, well, you tried to hurt the police officer or something like that when the lieutenant showed up, because the lieutenant, instead of listening to me too, you can watch the videos, he decided to, while I was rolling up the passenger side window, decided to reach in himself, and it's an automatic window, so when I pressed the button to have it automatically roll up, he kind of shocked me, so there's no way for me to stop it, because I was kind of shocked that he was doing what he was doing, which was reaching in, trying to into the door to try to open the door, so he put himself into that position to where if he got pinched or anything by the window, that's his own fault, because he's an idiot. And again, he was trying to deprive me of my rights, so I wasn't doing anything physically either to try to obstruct or anything like that, because it can't be obstruction if they are violating my rights, right? And I called 911 to validate that they're depriving me of my rights, because citing 14th Amendment insurrection against the people, because it's equal protection under the law, not general application of the law, right? So, and then they falsely arrested me and everything else, right? Title 18, Section 2381, treason, Title 18, Section 2382, misprision treason, so on and so forth, right? So they wanted to act like they're justified, but I got it to the court of law. DA wanted to have me remanded, which is attempted kidnapping under 241 and 242, which is life imprisonment or the death penalty for that, because they wanted to escalate that Class A misdemeanor, which was unlawful for them to try to cite me for, because they wanted to assert authority that they're never given. And then Section 2 of the New York State Civil Rights Code states quite clearly that supreme sovereignty in the people. 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution states quite clearly, whatever is not on the federal level goes to the state or the people. And likewise, under Article 1, Section 3 of the New York State Constitution states quite clearly that everybody has the ability to freely exercise. Exercise means put into action, not just mere belief, but to exercise the right to the free exercise of religion with impunity, as long as it's not licentious, meaning depriving somebody else of their rights, right? Because we live in a constitutional republic, not a democracy, so their rights weren't being violated. They had no right nor authority over me, and nothing I did was licentious. And what they're doing was discrimination, right? And it also states quite clearly that it can't be deemed incompetent, and yet they were trying to escalate to where I was being deemed incompetent for whatever reason, because I was rebuking devils, because anybody that is non-compliant with the 10 Commandments are children of Hashatan, therefore they are devils, and I was rebuking them accordingly, right? Sorting the whole separation of church and state, right? So ever since that whole interaction, we having everything escalated and final order given on the 12th of October, which is the 10th month on the Gregorian calendar, but the 8th month, October, means the 8th month, right? So I was citing that even in the police interaction, that when they're trying to, well, what, don't you understand the law and the kind of concept, and are you crazy? And trying to see if I had a psychological mental illness or what have you. It's like, yeah, no. And I cited quite clearly anybody that calls December the 12th month when it literally means the 10th is not right in the head, which put the officer a bit off balance on that. It's like, yeah, you can't escalate me to being incompetent, is basically what I was saying, because they're violating their oath of office, right? So I went to the forensic psychiatrist, asserted my rights with them. Judge decided to take the forensic psychiatrist's word for it that I was incompetent, despite the fact that it clearly states I can't be deemed incompetent, right? So, just plain stupidity. So I ignored the final order because bottom line is, again, it's unconstitutional. They have no authority to exercise that level of authority over me. And again, that final order, it's evidence in itself that they were committing an act of treason against the country, and they should be removed from office. Not only removed from office, but imprisoned for life or even get the death penalty, right? Because they don't have that right to deprive citizens of their rights without due process of law, right? So anyway, that said, I had 2 traffic interactions, and I have videos on that as well, where in the city of Batavia Police Department pulled me over. Didn't cite my rights or anything with them. I allowed them to violate my 4th Amendment and what have you. They didn't technically violate it because I gave them consent. So I gave consent to giving my ID over. Didn't mention it was a violation of my rights or the First Amendment or anything. Had a cordial interaction because I didn't have time for it, right? So then I went on my business. They didn't cite me for anything. What have you, and he even admitted openly that they're just trying to look for anything. There's no victim anywhere. They're just looking for anything to cite anybody for anything, right? Because that's the whole modus operandi when it comes to what they're being told by their superior officers, right? So that said, next interaction not long after, another police officer, I want to think he's a part of the sheriff's office of Batavia, pulled me over, said I was speeding, and I may have. There are 2 signs, but nevertheless, it's like, yeah, and it was right close to where I live in what have you, and it's like, yeah, it wasn't, if I did, it wasn't intentional, for 1, and 2, I was slowing down. Now, by the second sign, I was going 45 and a 40, right? So even though that's technically speeding, it's still a matter of there is no victim and the state has no authority, right? So that's why I asserted with them Penal Code 195.00 and what have you. He listened to me and what have you, and this time I gave up my 4th Amendment right, so he couldn't cite me for failure to identify and everything else. Gave him my ID, let him see that there's my name, there's my driver's license, run it if you want, and what have you. It's a clean license and blah, blah, blah. So that all said, I got a notice in the mail on Friday that, or Thursday night I should say, that my license is being suspended for failure to respond to a ticket. I'm like, what ticket? Supposedly they said I was issued a citation for North Tonawanda again on the 27th of November of last year, with a court appearance being scheduled for January 17th, I believe it is, right? It's like, yeah, and it was never pulled over, let alone given a citation. So that's perjury in itself. That's a crime, let alone, again, going with the whole issue with North Tonawanda. Yeah, it's a crime to even for a traffic infraction to be imposed on the church to try to assert that level of authority because you're not given that constitutionally, right? So I asserted that with the clerk and what have you. I have to look at the citation because I was never given one. She did email me a copy and what have you, so I have to look at that information. My phones have records of where I was at, all the time frames and everything else, so that validates that I wasn't pulled over at any given point in time. So, yeah, it's a no bueno situation, so I'm going to file another complaint with the Federal Division of Civil Rights, as well as possibly contact the FBI directly, maybe even contact the state police and file a complaint, a hate crime complaint against the North Tonawanda police. But I have to look at the citation and figure it out first before I proceed. Shalom.